Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in beautiful Brooklyn, New York. My name is Max Cohen, and I will be one of your hosts today on the MOCA Live podcast. Thank you for joining us. Before we get into today's conversation, I would like to introduce my co-host, as always. That would be the founder of the Museum of Crypto Art, Mr. Colborne Bell. Colborne, we got finger guns today. Very nice.
Finger guns. I brought them today just for you.
Wow, this is truly a momentous day.
Yeah.
And joining myself and Colborne today, we have an artist, a crypto artist since 2020. You call yourself a lifelong developer driven to help build an equitable future on public EVM infrastructure, which I just love the language, and is a perfect person to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is crypto art and Twitter, amongst other things. So please welcome Max Jackson to MOCA Live. Max, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. You totally took that line about my interests straight from my
from your website,
my on-chain business card.
Oh, yep. I do my research. I do a little bit of research and then I just lift it straight from there. So Max, importantly, you are the first other Max to be on this podcast who is not me. What's that like?
Wow.
Well, us Maxes, we're all, we're the best. So it's a privilege to be part of the Max cabal.
If you're not remiss to say so, are you a Maxwell, a Maximilian, just a straight Max?
I'm also a Maxwell, like yourself.
Let's go, baby. Come on. All right. I knew I had a good feeling about having you on today. So, all right. To kind of set up today's conversation, I've watched you, Max, kind of fan out through crypto art in search of an audience in a way which has felt to me to be kind of non-traditional and new. And we've talked about that just one-on-one before. And I kind of just want to spend today talking about the idea of like the crypto art audience in general, right? The people on the other end of the screens who kind of see our work, who interact with us, I hope not too optimistic to say so, but who want a relationship with our work and with us, and like these important questions of like where the hell they are and like how can we find them. So I kind of want to start by mentioning a couple of the things that I think you do that are interesting, and then kind of diving deeper into there. So, I please correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been releasing crypto art since 2020. You've done so, I believe, in like the traditional ways, minting on kind of like these big platforms. Here's a one of one, come find me, I'm on Twitter, etc. But you've also kind of dabbled with like subscription-based models of artwork release with your Muse token. And you were exceedingly quick to bring Warpcast into your kind of like communications practice. But I want to start at the beginning and then kind of work our way to now. So let's start with Twitter, because it remains, for better or worse, like the home of all of crypto art and all its audiences kind of en masse. So Max, like, how have you seen crypto art develop via Twitter in your time within this ecosystem?
Well, I mean, I was an early Twitter. I'm just one of those early adopter types where, I have always just jumped on whatever the latest thing is because it interests me. That's just how I am. I'm one of those guys. And Twitter was one of those as well. And so I actually stopped using Twitter for years because like you said in my on-chain bio there, I'm a lifelong developer. I started when I was a little kid. And so when I got on Twitter, I naturally went towards the tech people. And it just became like watching tech Twitter is like just watching a bunch of VC bros huff their own farts, and it's just not fun. So I just stopped using it because I just couldn't handle how boring it was.
Sure.
I did not curate my feed very well, but I returned when I realized what was happening with crypto art. Like, early adopter, I've been in crypto for a while, but I didn't realize people were using NFTs for art until 2020, which like blew my mind because I had all these other ideas about what it was going to be used for. So yeah, I changed everything up. I started following artists, unfollowed all the boring tech people. And I went full-time crypto like right away, mostly because I didn't have anything else going on at the time, and I was like ready to commit.
Mhm.
So yeah, Twitter was like the way to do it. 2020, 2021, I spent, like so many other people, so many hours a day just trying to like build an audience. The things that worked for me, aside from just shilling my art, were connecting with different communities and like building up group chats with different groups of artists and collectors. That was a huge part of my whole like initial growth phase in those early 2020 and 2021 days. And then like early Twitter Spaces.
Sure.
But
I remember.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I wrote a piece years ago for NFT Now, which feels strange to even say out loud. But it was about Twitter and crypto art and how those developed. And I had interviewed Robness for that because he had been doing this since I think like 2016, or kind of was involved in crypto Twitter. And he was saying it seemed very logical to me how things would develop, that you had all these crypto people and they were just talking about things on Twitter, because that was, especially 2000 to 2016 era, that was where all sorts of just like mainstream conversations were happening, and even like a little bit fringe conversations. So as NFTs developed and as crypto art would develop on top of that, of course it was always going to be located on Twitter, because the audience that you were kind of searching for was so small, and it was all kind of like people who were already indoctrinated into crypto. They were already developers, they already owned crypto, you were selling NFTs to them, so naturally you were in this place. But again, I mean, the like pregnant part of this question is that like everything crypto art is Twitter now. Like, we can move out of these paradigm shifts a little bit, but the audience, the wider audience, right? Crypto people, NFT people, degens, art collectors, etc. The like hub of information and communication is on Twitter, right? And I'm always fascinated with this question in crypto art of like, which follows which's example, right? Does crypto art Twitter follow Twitter's example, or does crypto art Twitter follow crypto art's example? I don't know if you have an answer to that question, or if you have a lean on that question, but I'd be curious to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean that's a funny question. It to me feels like crypto art Twitter is largely isolated from the rest of Twitter. Like, you don't see, when people generally complain about Twitter nowadays, they're like, oh, it's too political. Oh, there's extremists and everybody's arguing and mad. I don't see any of that, because I only subscribe to artists and collectors and and like domain specific stuff. And like, I don't see really much overlap at all. So yeah, I don't think it gets it from Twitter, because all the complaints people have, I'm just not seeing in our domain. But you know what? I also don't agree in what you said about Twitter being the de facto 100%, hub of crypto art. I don't think that's true anymore. It was true for a long time, and it is true for certain audiences, but it is changing. Yeah, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into like Warpcast, which I presume is what you're kind of implying here in a second. But Colburn, I want to get your kind of opinion on the same question, like of which mechanism, like, is crypto art Twitter more crypto art, or is it more Twitter? I guess is the best way to pose that question.
Well, I want to provide some context, and I think this is, it's 2017. The main social platforms are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. And it was Jack Dorsey at the time that really was evangelizing Bitcoin. So a lot of the crypto people at that time just kind of flocked and said this will be the social media that. So I think there's precedence for crypto Twitter, and I think that's probably why crypto art Twitter developed as a sub niche of that. But fast forward to today, and we are beginning to like lay the breadcrumbs away from these platforms that tend to be causing us like more anxiety than they seem to be worth. I think a lot of people really did give it their all in 2020, 2021, try to build an audience, try and get some attention, and it went in places that largely felt kind of like out of our control and unrepresentative of what we wanted the message to be. So it feels to me now that it has certainly fractured, but at the end of the day, I think that's a good thing because it drives kind of more of the ownership paradigms and towards the adoption that we really want to see.
Sure. And you and I had been talking about this the other day about like the fact that the algorithm is constantly changing on Twitter. And so when it comes to like, an artist's livelihood depends on them having the ability to precisely and quickly communicate with their audience base or their collector base. If certain information is being suppressed and other information is being exaggerated at any given time with no rhyme or reason, or a constantly changing rhyme or reason, it obviously like has a negative effect on an artist's ability to even like communicate with the people who are in their network, who are interested in them, who have a relationship with them.
And I want to say really quickly that it started out as its own thing, and then it got turned upside down by the people that knew how to kind of manipulate Twitter. Yeah. Right. And that's when Twitter, the idea of Twitter was brought to crypto art. And that could have been, like controversial people like Beanie Maxi being constantly inflammatory, flowing, like throwing shit on the wall, just kind of seeing what's sticking. Art Chick, you're probably like Cosmos, your 6529s. Like these were people that were very well versed in online internet marketing and brought that idea into the niche of crypto art.
So yeah, it makes total sense, right? That you would have this thing start as a communication mechanism and then obviously be taken over by people who can gamify that communication mechanism. And Max, I'd like to ask you, like, when or if did you realize that using Twitter as the predominant crypto art communication mechanism for yourself was no longer kind of applicable? Like, when did you feel that the schism between your ability to communicate and like your ability to be seen, like when that started to shift away in a way that felt irredeemable?
It's hard to pinpoint a time because so much happened, and with the ups and downs of the market, and like when the other side sale happened and the entire market crashed and nobody bought anything for months. Like that was a start of a time. And I wasn't able to find my audience there because my usual audience at that point was just dry. They had nothing left to spend, and the market was like not doing hot, so everybody was just holding their money. But at that point, I think the artists that were in it for the art and not just for a buck, they stuck around. They kept sharing each other's art, and we still had visibility. And I mean, the obvious answer is when it became X and the algorithm started changing dramatically, and the reply guy-ism became your ticket to visibility. That was a huge game changer, because like I don't play the game that way. It's fine. It's fine to do that. That's just not something I'm willing to do. I'm not gonna go suck up to an influencer or somebody just because like that's I want their attention. I'm not gonna play pick me. I'm not. So when that became the name of the game, I stopped trying, and it was no longer worth it for me to sink my time into the game if that's what the rules were.
Yeah, naturally. We're going to move off of Twitter in a second, but I just want to ask one more question about it. Like, do you think, based on like what you've seen today with Twitter, again, still being the kind of, or at least my posture, I know you disagree, but being like a predominant communication mechanism for crypto art, like, do you think there's even a possibility, say for like a new artist, of finding, and probably more importantly, like holding on to an audience of, whether it's admirers or just like-minded folks, reliably on Twitter? Or is it just too beholden to like the reply guyism and the algorithmic whims? Like, have we gone over the hump with that?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. I think, yes, absolutely there's room. But it's how you play the game. You know, it's if you're good at marketing, if you are good at Twitter, frankly, you know, then yeah, you can do it. And obviously, if you have good art and people recognize that, that's the first and foremost, like most important thing. Because if you don't have good art, nobody's going to pay attention to you. But
Or widely appealing art, perhaps.
okay, widely appealing art and the ability to conjure up some discussion. You need to be able to get people to reply to you on Twitter. That's the name of the game. Like if you don't know how to do that, then you can be an artist, but you're not going to be a Twitter artist.
Yeah, naturally. Well, I think that that's actually a really interesting point of like the schism between the crypto artist and the Twitter artist, because obviously there are artists who probably are more in line, their work and their ethos, with crypto art values, but then there are artists who, whether it again is because of the wide appeal of their art or because of their skill at using the kind of marketing mechanisms of Twitter, are able to like gamify that system or like win the gamified system. And again, we'll move on in a second, but Colburn, I'm curious your opinion on that same question of like whether we are over the hump with Twitter being a useful mechanism of communication and like information dissemination, just because like we still are all kind of thinking that there's going to be this big bull market coming, that we'll have more eyes, more artists, etc. Will they see in Twitter a possibility of making the same kind of name for themselves that people in 2020 and probably on through 2021, the beginning of X, might have seen?
Tough question. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer of how this thing gets rebuilt, repackaged, and like reinvented. But it just kind of feels like it will move away from Twitter. I don't think we will be. I think increasingly over time, Twitter will prove to be an inefficient mechanism to acquire the information that we want.
Yeah, well said.
It just doesn't feed me anything. And, you know, that spirit, that special spirit is, I think, seemingly lost, and it might be lost forever. And I think that's okay.
Fair enough. And I think that Max, like, I want to jump into like your specific choices now, because as perhaps not proof, but as a suggestion to the fact that we are over the hill with Twitter, like you have turned towards these, I'm going to call them non-traditional kind of like avenues of audience seeking that like, I want to know more about. I want to know about the success of, and I want to start with the Muse token, you know, this kind of like subscription art kind of, dissemination tool that you've kind of built around yourself. And I was hoping you could tell us just like, what was the thinking behind Muse token? What were you influenced by? And like, just, I guess, could you just talk about that in some?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to be approached by Johnny from Hypersub, from Fabric that make Hypersub, to be one of the first artists. So the timing was really great for me, and it being a big opportunity for growth. But prior to that, I had sort of a sea change in my thinking around minting. I struggled to make sales for a couple years after 2020 and 2021. I mean, and a lot of that was because of the pressure put on artists from the mainstream crypto art collectors and audience, being mind your rarity, be careful about your prices, things like that are sort of like traditional art world ideas. And so the way that I make art quickly. I make a lot of art. Even my calligraphy, I have this, for people who don't know, I do, you know, I made this shirt as bleach painted calligraphy. I do these ornate, detailed, intricate calligraphy pieces. Even those, I have almost never spent more than an afternoon on a single piece. And so for me, the question of like, how do I manage my rarity was a weird one, because I am more in the camp of it's more important to put your record, your history as an artist on chain than it is to be careful and like curate every little piece and like say, oh, this is my best piece. Oh, this is my next best piece. Because like I'm making so many pieces, and you know, I don't know all the answers. Sometimes when I put a daily artwork out and I don't mint it, somebody's like, "That's the best thing you've ever made," and I look at it and I think, "Oh, that's just some crap I was uninspired that day, so I thought outside of the box." So you never know, like, what people are going to take an interest in. So I think it's important to put your history out there, and so I had started doing that. And I started minting daily artworks on Optimism and not putting them up for sale, just putting them straight in a vault and having them be part of my history. And then when Johnny approached me and told me about Hypersub, which for those who don't know, it's a subscription NFT. It's just like a normal NFT, except it has this extra mechanic of time. And you have a balance of function that you can call on that NFT, which is not normal for an ERC 721 NFT. And that returns an amount of time remaining in your subscription. So in non-technical terms, you can think of it like a refillable gift card. The NFT is a gift card with time on it, and you can refill that time. So it's just a subscription NFT that you can top up whenever it's running low or runs out. Mm-hmm. So when I started this Hypersub, I named it Muse Token because, like I said, I had just decided my objective was to follow the muse and just keep creating and not get my mentality stuck on following anybody else's advice, not try to make one style that is going to be like easy for people to digest or follow. Like, I'm an artist, artists do different things. I'm going to keep exploring. So that was sort of the inspiration behind the naming of the token. And so when I started making art, it was a moving target, and I said so in the description. When you mint a Muse token, you could receive any number of artworks per month. And I started with one number and I changed it. Now I do weekly drops. And I've done that for the past almost all year so far. Actually, yeah, I think I changed it up in January. So every week since January, I've been airdropping art to Muse token subscribers. And I think I'm going to change that again because I'm realizing that it's great. It's helping me explore and like try new things and not be afraid to mint something that, like, I made that week that maybe I could do better, but no, I made it that week and it's good. I think it's good. It could be better. Yeah. But like, I'm always going to feel that way. That's what any good artist is going to say of their own work.
Sure. So, yeah. I mean, we've seen like subscription services. I use that term loosely, kind of with air quotes, but like the subscription model, right, I think was most famously captured with Super Rare's Rare Pass, right? But that was, I think, less of like there was a desire for a personal relationship between Rare Pass holders and Super Rare, but I think it was postured as the second most important thing, almost like the incidental effect of this kind of like long-term art-based gambling proposition, right? But you would keep people in the Super Rare orbit, right? They would be watching you. They would be interacting with you on a month-to-month basis. They would be interested in what you're doing, etc. We did the same thing with the museum's kind of content, where we kind of moved off of Twitter and things on Medium towards a Substack, where we're like, okay, here's the people who are going to care about us, right? And the content's going to change over time in terms of its content, like the physical content or the aim or the amount, but like the slapdash nature of just throwing information up on the internet and hoping that the algorithm is going to like bless it with views that day. Like, that's just not a sustainable model for anybody, whether you're an artist, whether you're, a nonprofit foundation's content aim, whether you're like a large scale business. And obviously, like, you define success in those metrics very differently, right? And I'm curious because I want to ask you about like whether you found success with the Muse token system, but like, what do you consider a success in kind of like the audience finding realm?
Yeah, that's an important question because I do think that Muse token has helped me. Hypersub, my Muse token Hypersub, has helped me find success in the sense that it helps me stay connected with my more dedicated collectors. Like the people who are willing to subscribe for 3-6 months, a year, those people, I have a private chat with them that they're able to talk all the time. Some of them are silent, but those people who are willing to subscribe for a year up front, knowing that they have no idea what they're going to get, but they just love seeing airdrops from me and hear the updates. I know those people are the real supporters who, I want to stay connected with. And prior to this, it was really hard to figure out who was just speculating and who was, buying in on a meme or whatever, because I've done some derivative stuff. But yeah, with this, it's really helping me find my core audience.
It's an interesting point. I want to hang on that thought for a second and turn it to you, Colborne. I'm curious, like when you're collecting art or when you were collecting lots of art, what were the mechanisms by which you could communicate that you were a real kind of interested collector to the artist you were collecting instead of a speculator?
Ooh, well, I had the probably unusual benefit of being in the market before it was a speculation-driven market. So I already had a pre-existing reputation of like buying art that I liked and supporting things that nobody else was supporting. So I don't think I had to do any convincing. It's kind of just who I am, I always said that I wanted to be like first to take a chance on people. And, at the end of the day, it's tough because, at the end of the day, it's tricky because there's only so far you as one person can take somebody. And when you're trying to like bring new people in and have them have like a positive experience, well, just as, the market heated up and then fell off a cliff, it just got harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, a big part of like my thing now is what is the responsibility of stewardship to the collection that I've created that I have, as an individual have. Like, what is this investment that I've made in the artist? What is this investment that I've kind of made in myself, and how can they how do we carry this forward in like a very positive, sustainable way? And I try to think from a macro perspective on how to help the many and not just the few. And my, I guess, solution to that is, the top in the beginning only gets as big and important as we continue to grow the base and spread this idea that digital content, should be archived and preserved and stored, and that more creators should be leaning into the idea of like creating and minting more.
There's a dichotomy here, which I find really fascinating, which is the onus being on the artist to find their audience, or on the audience to like reveal themselves and be a positive kind of force for the artist, right? Where does the responsibility lie between, like, again, to just say it in another way, like the artist to find and hold on to their audience versus the audience finding and holding on to their artist? I'm curious, Max, where you think that like the responsibility lies currently.
Oh, I mean, I don't think that any audience members are going to take responsibility for for anything. We live in like the fast media consumption days. I would love, I also collect a lot, and I, like you, Colborne, like to be an early supporter of an artist, and I will like, I'll share their stuff, but that doesn't seem, I mean, it's the norm for some people, but it isn't as common as I would like it to be. Which is why I think it's important for people to like artists to branch out. Like if you're going to rely on Twitter and you're not going to play the Twitter game, you're either going to find yourself complaining a lot or giving up. Because it's like, you have to work really hard and not just at your art to be successful as an artist.
So let's stop here and jump to Warpcast, because I've wanted to talk about this topic for a while, but I kind of wanted to wait for the hype to die down a bit. And I wanted to wait for like actual opinions to kind of form and experiences to form, because, whether it was, I don't remember exactly, but it felt like maybe a month and a half ago when like Warpcast kind of appeared, and it had this like bright kind of a well evangelized moment. and then it kind of came back a little bit when it started to launch whatever the degen token tipping thing was, where like users could tip people for a good post and such. But I am curious, like, can you talk about your relationship with Warpcast, but also like what is the value you are seeing from a platform like Warpcast, which purports to be decentralized and not nearly as algorithmically driven as Twitter, and like a better home for all these kinds of like crypto adjacent environments?
Yeah, so that's a lot of questions at once, but I think there's a lot of relevance in like how I was thinking as I approached this new kind of era in my art career, where I just sort of like kicked the advice to the wind and said, I'm going to do my thing. I said I was an early adopter, and by that I mean I like to be sort of like forward thinking in how I do things, and rather than take the advice of other people, rather than like subscribe to like what somebody else has done. And so when I was onboarded to Warpcast, and I actually went to FarCon last year, which was like early in the year. I think it was about a year ago, because FarCon just happened again this year. I went there, I met people in person, I met a lot of brilliant people, and I had conversations with them where, I'm quite critical of areas of crypto, and it's because I love this field so much, and I think it's important to be critical of it. And I was, talking with people who are members of Nouns DAO, and I was like ruthlessly criticizing the Nouns DAO itself as a bad solution and risky. And I love it in principle, but I think that it's inherently problematic for reasons that it can be like that came to be. People can game the system and like drain the treasury, and those people agreed with me. They were like, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, or whatever. Maybe they had thought of it that way. And when I had that conversation and I realized that this crowd was thoughtful enough and not just like pumping their own bags, that they were able to take criticism of something they're heavily invested in, I realized like those are the people I want to target. These people are thinking about the future. They're not just thinking about making a buck or gaining an audience. Like they're trying to build the future, and like that is what's interesting to me, doing something new. And so like leaving Twitter behind and going to Farcaster was the natural best move. One obvious reason, the algorithm was like totally different. Two, the audience was smaller, so I was more likely to get visibility. And that's still the case, even though certain channels you're just going to get like washed away in a tidal wave of casts. There's channels. You can go make your own channel. You can go find a small channel. You can go be a reply guy on Farcaster to more success than you can on Twitter right now. And there's a heavy meme culture, like social games being played and stuff. And now back then it was really kind of like not as humorous. But yeah, so I started there, and I realized that the collector base is different. It's not this fine art, speculative art collector. Most people who are collecting NFTs on Farcaster were doing so to be a part of something, to be a part of a community, to be to signal support for an artist. They weren't savvy NFT crypto art collectors. They largely weren't people who were like dying to own an X copy or have bought a lot of stuff on Super Rare, So that was interesting because it allowed me the opportunity to introduce my work and different mechanisms to this audience. And so when I started going really full steam ahead, that happened in October and November of last year, minting on Zora and sharing some collections. Hyper Ghouls on Zora was like really successful, and that was sort of targeting both this community-oriented feeling on Farcaster, but also my existing community in the base schools, who are just a bunch of awesome people. They're so funny. And that was well collected. That led into Hypersub. And then, so one of my first drops with Hypersub was a degen derivative in a sense. There's this collection called Farcats by Oxen, which is like a highly touted collection of like weird AI cats on Warpcast. And so everybody there knew about that, and that was one of the that was probably the most collected art collection on Warpcast. And so I made degen cats, and obviously I priced it in degen, and I minted it, and I put all of them in a liquidity pool on SudoSwap, which is like perfect degen material right there. So like, priced on a bonding curve, permanent liquidity. Like every single one of them was initially on sale, so I only made like a royalty for every sale. And people loved the idea of that. It was so tuned in to that community, the degen community, both for the token and for the fact that it was like speculation driven on a bonding curve with SudoSwap. And those sold like hotcakes. And yeah, so that was a big win for me, because I realized how I can work with a community to like introduce them to things that a lot of those people honestly just weren't familiar with, like bonding curve, NFT pools.
So this is very interesting to me, because it sounds like what you're talking about is that there is just a different audience on Warpcast, right? And that it may not, that there are tools within the platform itself, these kind of decentralized, these channels, this kind of like Discord-esque with a timeline kind of like structure to the thing. But the important part is that there is a different quality of people, and the people have an overlap with the folks on Twitter, but that's the important thing. And I think the obvious question has to be like, is that preservable long term in a way which it proved not to be with Twitter? Like, especially if you're going to keep, not you, if Warpcast and Farcaster are going to keep offering certain incentives to using the platform, especially financial kind of degenerate gambling incentives.
Right.
How do you keep that from becoming Twitter when you can make a buck off of using this social media platform? And the answer might be you can't. Just from like what you've seen, how strong is that community? Can it actually like bulwark itself against a potential tidal wave that I think the network itself would want?
I don't think that it is necessarily something I can hold on to. I think that this realm, like we all know, a week in crypto is like a year, and it's no different when you're on Farcaster. I think if I'm gonna find success, I'm gonna have to keep playing the game, in the sense that I'm going to have to continue to innovate in how I present my work in order to capture people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like what I've tried to accomplish with Muse. I give a lot of free mints out on new platforms with new mechanisms. The bonding curve sale was only one. I do drops on different platforms when they give support for new tokens. Yeah, I think it's not something that you can necessarily hold on to. I think the general community vibe that existed when I dropped that collection, Degen Cats, isn't even around anymore. It's already changed completely. And since then, the size of the network has more than doubled, and the number of different communities that have popped up. Since then, permissionless channels launched, so there's all these little sub-communities popping up. And yeah, so a year from now, it could be completely different.
So I'm glad you phrased it like that, because that was actually kind of a loaded question, because I feel the same way, right? That we are essentially in all of crypto existing in this big funnel, right? And you have top levels, and it comes, it's crypto, it's Twitter, and it's crypto Twitter, and then it comes down from crypto Twitter to NFT Twitter, and NFT Twitter to crypto art Twitter. And now we're kind of getting smaller and smaller in terms of the communities that are going to like keep filtering out of this. Now it's on Warpcast, but then Warpcast is going to, like, as the top of the funnel comes up, we're going to need something below Warpcast, right? Where the same communities that you're looking for, and which a lot of artists are looking for, are going to keep searching for something that is fringe, where that community can be kind of like momentarily untouched. And so I want to pose the same question to both of you. And Colborne, perhaps we can start with you. Where like, where does this go? And like, is the logical conclusion of this kind of paradigm, if you agree with it in principle, that the art community is going to keep attempting to like outpace everyone looking to come into it? You're just going to keep developing apps, platforms, networks, further removed, further removed, further removed, to try and maintain that sense of like community cohesion.
Man, I think it's like showing up to maybe high school on the first day, and you just switch schools, and everybody's new, and everybody's trying to figure themselves out. And then like your group is kind of set, and maybe a couple people kind of come in and out. But I can tell you, I'm probably not going to be chasing the idea of discovery the rest of my life. You know, at some point, it's like the people that you care about are the investments that you made, both in time and energy to the people and in the art. And those connections are the new connections that are formed. And that's going to be what I kind of like care about if I choose to continue to play this game at all. It's just this fracturing, the splinter, the further down, I just find it increasingly difficult. I don't want to like go rebuild the museum's audience in a new place, only to have to go and rebuild the museum's audience in a new place ad nauseum. I think it's okay that things can happen in the moment, and then that moment might be done, and maybe people can, I don't know, move on or find different ways to express what they're passionate about in different ways.
Well, Max, I'll pose the same question to you, because, I think that like we can extrapolate what Colborne was saying about the museum to, you as an artist, right? Continuing to have to like find, build, and like tend to an audience in all of these new places.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. I think that you're right, Colborne. It's not realistic to expect people to like chase you from platform to platform all the time, and it's certainly not easy to maintain a presence on multiple platforms, especially when you have to like switch it up every couple of years. And so we didn't talk about this much, but on Warpcast, I host the crypto art channel, and I started a DAO for the crypto art channel, which I intend to build into a sort of community-driven curation entity, and that community being the Warpcast community of artists. But I don't expect all of the collectors to come over to Warpcast in order to find that art. I want to provide a way for us to give a platform to artists, and have that platform give them a little reach outside of their timeline, be it via another app, which is art centric, or in person in galleries, around the world. Because I just don't think it's really realistic to expect most artists to manage all that social media, all that like business side of things. Most people struggle with it. I struggle with it. I've had a very little, very small amount of like gallery showings with my own art. Most of them have been in metaverses, because I guess that's just easier for me to manage. But but we have a lot of people that are like trying to work with us, because this is clearly an issue that I'm not just feeling, or you, or either of you. It's hard to focus on discovery all the time, and it really helps if there's groups out there helping us all get discovered and discover new art. So yeah, that's a problem worth solving that I'm currently working on as well.
Well said. Well, as always with this podcast, we like to end with an unsolvable problem and no actual hard avenues on how to fix it. This has been a really fun conversation, Max. I really appreciate you being on with us and kind of giving us the lowdown on all this stuff. it's a lot to chew on, and I will chew on it and get back to you. It's kind of customary for us to kind of give you a moment to kind of tell everyone listening or watching kind of what you have going on or what they should know about you. So I'd just love to give you the floor for a moment and let us know what's up.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me here for this chat. For anybody who wants to follow me as an artist, honestly, right now, the best way to do that is to join my hyper sub. It's a small price comparatively monthly. Go to hypersub.xyz. You'll see Muse token there. It's like 0.00777 a month. And you get art every week or so. And I surprise people with free mints on occasion or discounted mints because I'm always dropping stuff. I have a drop coming up tomorrow on Highlight. So that will I don't know how much I can say, but they're launching a new feature and they asked me to be one of the initial artists. So if you enjoy art, that's all I'll say. You might want to check that one out as well. And if you're on Hypersub, if you're on Warpcast, check out the Crypto Art channel. Check out the Muse channel. Muse is my channel specifically for my art and my Hypersub. And I post all of my updates there and all my new art. And once you're a member of Hypersub, you can join the private chat and continue the conversation.
Rock and roll. Well, very cool. Thank you very much, Max. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, we would appreciate a like, follow, or subscribe on Spotify or Apple, wherever you get these podcasts. Remember, you can collect this episode and every episode for free on Zora forever, or as long as Zora exists, I suppose. If you like writing, please give us a follow on Substack at museumofcrypto.substack.com. I never get that URL right. You can find Max at MXJXN on Twitter and perhaps the same on Warpcast. I'm not sure. The very same on Warpcast. Excellent. I'm Max. Below me is Coborn. That's been Max Jackson, and we really appreciate everyone being on with us, and we will see you all very soon.